Director Ridley Scott told Deadline in 2023 that he had been offered to direct superhero movies, but that it wasn't for him. After telling us all that modern-day superhero movies are, quote,
no fucking good and boring as shit.
Plus, he said that he'd already directed 3 superheroes, Ellen Ripley in Alien, Rick Deckard in Blade Runner, and Maximus in Gladiator. He would go on to say,
the difference is, the fucking stories are better.
This madman with a camera is often interested in the beauty and violent nature of our past, and the possibilities and dangers of our future, all while presenting stories about the corruption of our present. He is a true artist with something to say about space and time and the human condition. Also, the alien condition. Ridley Scott hasn't really had a movie achieve both critical and commercial success since 2015's The Martian, which begs the question, what the f*** happened to Ridley Scott?
F*** you, thank you very much, f*** you, go f*** yourself, go on.
But to truly understand what the f*** happened to Ridley Scott, we must begin at the beginning, and the beginning began when he was born on his birthday, 1937, England, to a military family. He grew up with his older brother Frank and his younger brother, Tony, who followed Ridley into the directing profession, and with whom Ridley forged a bond of friendship. Scott leveraged his success in commercials to get a screenwriter and a producer to pitch The Duelist to Paramount, and secured $800,000 in funding, and was able to get lead actors Keith Carradine and Harvey Keitel. 2023's Napoleon has been referred to as Ridley Scott's Barry Lyndon, but he already did this in 1977 with The Duelist, which is funny because Stanley Kubrick made Barry Lyndon because he couldn't get his Napoleon picture off the ground. Then decades later, Ridley Scott, who was inspired by Barry Lyndon, would go on to make his own Napoleon film. It's just really cool and kind of beautiful how these two great filmmakers would work off of each other and inspire each other. I think Stanley Kubrick even let Ridley use some unused footage from The Shining. So yeah, Kubrick was a huge inspiration on Ridley when it came to making The Duelist, but he was also inspired by Western films, in particular John Ford's The Searchers. So yeah, as a standalone film, The Duelist is very well made and intimate. It's a little uneven in its pacing and its approach, but its overall gorgeous setting and meticulous staging and visceral action, it just all comes together so well. The Duelist would net Ridley Scott the Best First Work at the Cannes Film Festival, and it was nominated for the Palme d'Or. And though it was not a commercial success, The Duelist legitimized Ridley Scott as a film director, and it let everybody in Hollywood know that this guy was well worth investing in, which is how he was able to get his next project, 1979's Alien. It wasn't the first horror science fiction film, but it was perhaps the first to blend these genres so proficiently as to be considered by audiences and critics alike as one of the greatest horror movies and one of the greatest science fiction movies of all time. And as you know, Ridley's work on Alien has spawned a franchise that has persisted for over 45 years. And it's still going pretty strong. I haven't seen Romulus, but yeah, everyone says that it's not that horrible. But yeah, critics found Alien to be brilliantly atmospheric, legitimately scary, genuinely surprising, and truly memorable. A landmark film that would help change the future of cinema. Speaking of the future, his next project was 1982's Blade Runner. It was underappreciated upon its release, but the film has had a reach that has far exceeded its initial reception. Very few films have aged better stylistically or thematically. Ridley Scott was able to create a very intriguing story wrapped in an incredible production. This film explores the futility of our definition of humanity. The groundbreaking visuals and the unforgettable soundtrack combine to present a mysterious, daunting look at a potential future that leaves a lasting impact on viewers. Even though it's boring as f***. that Tears in the Rain monologue, it's probably one of the greatest things to ever happen in front of a camera. And decades later, the love for Blade Runner was still going strong that Hollywood tried it again, this time with director Denis Villeneuve, who is a worthy successor, I would say, with 2017's Blade Runner 2049. And it's actually pretty damn good, and it makes you wonder why Ridley's own recent films haven't consistently captured some of his original magic. But yeah, Blade Runner, it's so good, even though he had to make it like 4 different times. Look at all these director's cuts. And strangely enough, the Blade Runner alien director who warned us about technology taking over kinda helped technology take over. You see, Scott helped introduce the Apple Macintosh to the public consciousness with a landmark Super Bowl commercial in 1984, titled 1984. You know, because of George Orwell. And yeah, 1984, it would turn Apple into a household name. Apple would go on to become the biggest company in the world by many measures, and many argue that it's all because of the direction of Ridley Scott. But yeah, after 1984 came the year 1985, and in that year he made the movie Legend, which is kind of just, standard fantasy fare. It doesn't really offer much, but because it's Ridley Scott, the production design is, worth looking at. But other than Tim Curry, the acting is, misdirected, and the story is just too outlandish to care about. The only good thing that came out of this was that unicorn footage that Ridley would throw into one of his Blade Runner director's cuts. Then came 1987's Someone to Watch Over Me, a lesser talked about Ridley film. It's a police thriller with a romance story plot thrown in there, and this one was a financial flop. After Someone to Watch Over Me, Ridley Scott would release a similarly shallow but stylish film called Black Rain. But this time, the film was a box office smash, bringing in over $134 million on a $30 million budget. Ridley Scott would then hit audiences next with a massive hit when he directed Thelma and Louise in 1991. And yeah, the chemistry between Gina Davis and Susan Sarandon, it's adorable, it's beautiful, and it was universally praised, all thanks to the direction of Ridley. These strong female characters were presented in a way that was rare. They were empowered by violence, and they sat in the driver's seat of their own fates, even as they were driving off a cliff, which, looks nice, but I don't know if that was the best idea, ladies. Thelma and Louise was a critical and box office success. It also granted Ridley Scott with his first Best Director Oscar nomination. Then in 1992 came 1492, Conquest of Paradise. The critics didn't really love it because, they wanted a nuanced and balanced portrayal of Christopher Columbus, and the casting of Gerard Depardieu, who sailed the ocean blue in 1492. I don't know, it was kind of distracting. But because it's Ridley Scott, the settings were praised as both grand and fitting, and this movie had a tremendous opportunity to say something, but it didn't. So yeah, after sailing and failing with Columbus on the ocean blue, Ridley decided to stay on the ocean blue and direct a film called White Squall, which received mixed reviews and performed poorly at the box office. But it does have some wonderfully tense oceanic moments, and Jeff Bridges, he shines in the lead role. The audiences were perhaps turned off by its long runtime, but hey, it's a Ridley Scott film. All of his movies are long. Also, the studio didn't exactly know how to market this White Squall movie. Ridley Scott continued to be a champion for strong female characters with 1997's G.I. Jane. The film performed poorly upon release, but has since garnered a cult following. The pacing can be distractingly uneven, but the actors play off of each other well. But of course, G.I. Jane rose again in popularity when it caused Will Smith to smack Chris Rock.
Jada, I love you. G.I. Jane 2, can't wait to see it. All right? Oh, wow. It was a G.I. Jane jump.
But yeah, let's go back to the year 2000, when Ridley Scott brought us his masterpiece, Gladiator. It grossed a lifetime $766 million on a $103 million budget, and netted Scott another Best Director nomination at the Academy Awards. And Gladiator would go on to win 5 Oscars, including Best Picture. It speaks to Gladiator's longevity and impact that the 2022 re-release exclusively to the United Kingdom grossed nearly $40 million. Ridley Scott's craft absolutely shines throughout every scene in Gladiator, as he perfectly transports the viewer into ancient Rome and gets star-making performances out of Crow and Phoenix. The action, the set pieces, the intimate moments all approach perfection in a film that is as engaging as it is meticulously executed. And since Ridley was riding high on Gladiator, the anticipation and the excitement for a sequel to The Silence of the Lambs, directed by Ridley Scott, got everybody hoping it would be, one of the greatest horror films ever made. But no, the 2001 sequel Hannibal was, nothing compared to Silence of the Lambs. But it did make a lot of money, $350 million. The critics didn't like it, but audiences were like, yeah, this is fine. But yeah, instead, Hannibal, it leans more into camp and gore, and it got mixed results. My brain didn't like this movie. And the same year that he made the blockbuster hit Hannibal, he would continue with his string of hits by bringing us Black Hawk Down, a masterpiece of a war movie, which earned $212 million at the box office and got him his 3rd Best Oscar nomination. Black Hawk Down was praised for its tight action and its modern depiction of warfare. And yeah, there's a whole lot of warfare. Like, this whole movie is just one long action battle sequence. Black Hawk Down grabs you and never lets you go. And unfortunately, in my opinion, it may very well be the last film of Ridley Scott's that I would truly call great. Ridley Scott's next project is not great, but it is really, really good. It was 2003's Matchstick Men. Well received by the critics, but it faced stiff competition at the box office that not even Nicolas Cage could handle. Matchstick Men, it's a hilarious black comedy that has, some crime and some drama thrown in there. It's very enjoyable, without asking too much of the viewing audience, even though it has a wonderful twist at the end. Matchstick Men, it's a smaller film that doesn't have, an epic setting. It just focuses on the smaller character moments. I just wish he kind of made more of these films, actually. But then I'm reminded of A Good Year, and I'm like, nah, I don't want no small romantic comedy from Ridley Scott. I want something epic. And you know what? Ridley knows that. So he went back to his big, sweeping, epic ways with Kingdom of Heaven. He took on a risky subject matter, the Crusades. Some people still aren't over them, and he delivered this powerful story with his usual grand spectacle. And yeah, this ain't the best Ridley Scott epic, but the battle scenes stand up to his best work. The movie does suffer from distracting lulls, and it misses the opportunity to make any larger statements on its themes, and it's really, really, really f***ing long. But rumor has it all of those negative things that people had issues with Kingdom of Heaven were fixed with his infamous director's cut. Well, all the things except for it being really, really, really f***ing long. Ridley would then bless us with a wonderful film called American Gangster. It's not the best gangster film ever made, but it is respectful to gangster movies that preceded it. The rivalry and the moral contrast between Denzel Washington's character and Russell Crowe's character is the focus of the film, and Ridley handles it like a master. Ridley Scott next directed a movie called Body of Lies, which on paper should have been a massive hit. It had Leonardo DiCaprio and Russell Crowe in an action spy thriller, but surprisingly, the movie failed to resonate and was soon forgotten. Like, seriously, when was the last time you ever heard anybody mention Body of Lies? So Ridley Scott and Russell Crowe were like, oh no, what do we do? Body of Lies, it failed and it sucked. I guess we gotta do what we are good at. Yes, big historical epics, let's do that, they said. But there's so many big historical stories throughout history that are so epic, which one should we choose, they thought. And then they randomly picked Robin Hood for some reason. We're like, hey, let's gladiatorize Robin Hood and not make him a fox. Make him a crow. I don't know what it is about Robin Hood, it just feels like a fake movie to me. Like a Saturday Night Live spoof. It's almost too obvious, yet completely out of left field at the same time. But people still went to see it because this thing made $322 million at the box office, but with a massive $200 million production budget, it barely broke even. That's right, even though Robin Hood made over $300 million, it's still looked at as a financial failure, which is kind of funny because Robin Hood is all about that money. So after trying to recreate the magic of Gladiator with Robin Hood, Ridley was like, I guess I'm gonna recreate the magic of Alien with Prometheus. This next installment in the Alien franchise hit us in the face in 2012, and it was praised as a visually stunning movie that unfortunately affected major implications for the Alien cinematic universe that not all fans appreciated. It kind of, ruins the whole point of Alien. It takes out the mystery. The scariness came from not knowing where this fucker came from. I don't know, I hate Prometheus, but I probably honestly would like it if it wasn't part of the Alien franchise and, ruined it. So it sucks. But it didn't suck at the box office. Made over 400 million buckaroos. In August of 2012, Ridley Scott was on the phone with his brother and business partner, Tony Scott. A fantastic director in his own right. But Tony, he had cancer. And the sickness and the treatment for this sickness, it was tearing him apart. It left him unable to do what he loved, to make movies, to create, and especially to mountain and rock climb, a practice that helped motivate and focus him. There was even one time in an interview where Ridley recounted climbing with Tony in their youth, losing his footing and his younger brother repeatedly telling him, I got you, I got you. I got you. And on the phone, back in 2012, Ridley noticed a somber tone in his brother's voice and worked to encourage him by suggesting projects for him to direct. What Ridley didn't know is that immediately after hanging up on the call, Tony would make his way over to a bridge and take his own life. The world lost an influential filmmaker that day, and Ridley Scott lost a piece of himself. It was truly shocking and broke everybody's heart who was a fan of this man's work. And we all knew how much Ridley loved his brother. And when he was remembering his brother a few years later, he said, I miss a friend.
Always my buddy and my partner. I share this star with him because I know he's watching. Thank you very much.
Before we continue with our video, here's a reminder to click the Store tab on any of our JoBlo channels and browse our collection of the latest and freshest designs in our merch store. Go get you some.
Ridley's next directorial effort was The Counselor in 2013. But yeah, for some reason, Hollywood didn't know how to market this Ridley Scott film either, and The Counselor performed very poorly. So Ridley thought, hey, I guess I better do the epic thing again, and there's lots of epic stories in the Bible, and movies based on biblical stories, they tend to do better at the box office than with critics, and 2014's Exodus, Gods and Kings is no exception. Many struggled to justify why the story needed to be retold in this way. It just kind of felt random and unnecessary and, again, kinda unoriginal. So honestly, at this point in his career, around 2014, Ridley Scott was kind of looked at as an old man who had lost his touch. I'm just being honest, that's what people were saying. His last 4 or 5 projects were extremely not impressive. He really needed to give us something that was out of this world. And yeah, I kind of disagree here, but everybody on Earth loved Ridley Scott's next film. And some people call it truly his very, very latest great movie. The last great movie he made. The Martian. It was praised as epic yet intimate, successfully wrapping the mundane with the spectacular, balancing bleakness with humor. It was a surprise, massive box office hit and was nominated for 7 Oscars, including Best Picture, and stands as a true win for Ridley Scott during a trying time in his life. So yeah, he was already up in space with the Martian, so he was like, let's stay here and try Alien again. But I swear, he said, I swear I won't fuck it up again. And so we were like, okay, try again. And in 2017, Ridley Scott brought us Alien Covenant. And like Prometheus before it, it bothered fans of the first 2 Alien films, because it ruined them. Then came All the Money in the World, which did not make all the money in the world. It actually made $57 million worldwide against a $50 million budget. But the critics, they adored it, especially Christopher Plummer's performance, which is quite impressive considering he came in at the last minute after Kevin Spacey got Me Too'd. And since Ridley Scott and Christopher Plummer, since they're such pros, they're just like, hey, let's just reshoot this real quick. We'll bring Marky Mark and his Funky Bunch back, and we'll do it again, and you'll get nominated for an Oscar, and Kevin Spacey will not be in it. Then, decades after making his first feature film, The Duelist, the director of The Duelist would bring us a film called The Last Duel, which part of me thought it was going to be his last film, which would kind of be perfect, but, I don't want him to stop, and he didn't stop. But yeah, The Last Duel, this is a medieval drama that was yet another financial flop. But those critics, they liked it. Honestly, The Last Duel, it can be a slog, but the titular duel is a testament to Ridley's craft. It's beautiful, it's elegant, it's brutal, it's fucking epic. So this millennial right here says to just fast forward to the last scene in The Last Duel. Just watch that. In fact, Ridley Scott blames us horrible millennials for The Last Duel's lack of financial success, and he may very well be right, but there's also, economic reasons, and the marketing wasn't that great, and the movie itself, it's extremely dark. Not just literally, but thematically. It has graphic depictions of sexual and physical violence, and, maybe audiences just didn't want to stare at that for probably 3 hours, especially back in 2021. Then Ridley gave us House of Gucci. It's all moderate success, but was met with mixed reviews. But many people thought this film was kind of all over the place and disjointed tonally. I don't know. Gucci! So Ridley Scott was just like, okay, I'm just going to be Ridley Scott. And I'm gonna do what everybody expects me to do, which is the thing I should have done long ago, but I'm gonna do it now. And he did it. In 2023, he brought us the epic Napoleon, based on the life of Napoleon, not the Dynamite one. And yeah, when we all first heard the news that Ridley Scott was gonna take on the Napoleon biopic, everyone praised Zeus, that this would be the return to his Gladiator director ways, of making a pitch-perfect historical epic with exciting characters and thrilling action, but no, it wasn't. We've seen a lot of pretty decent biopics in our time, and this just didn't stand up to those. It had a detached story that lacks a true soul. And many people criticized the historical inaccuracies of the film, but Ridley Scott responded to those critics by saying,
Were you there? No. Well, then shut the fuck up then.
I'm the first to admit when I make a mistake. I simply never do.
In many ways, the story of Napoleon parallels the story of Ridley, from their rapid ascent to their, at times, irrational confidence, especially to make something out of nothing. Scott admits that he makes hasty, seemingly random decisions sometimes. Napoleon and Ridley, they're both tough to pin down, with Scott expressing diverse themes and styles in his movies that spanned nearly every genre. And, well, Napoleon, he's doing his thing, spending most of his time at the water park. The film sets of Ridley Scott have been described as militaristic, and he's a firm believer that there needs to be one definitive voice commanding the effort. Film is a team sport, but you need a captain. Even if his recent failures outweigh his recent successes, his resume and his I don't give a fuck attitude command respect. Furthermore, is directing, as Quentin Tarantino likes to say, a young man's game? Or as Ridley pushes 90, are there still great movies on the horizon for him? Well, I certainly hope so. Starting with Gladiator 2 in November of 2024, which I hope is really, really good. But I don't know. And the first of probably many director's cuts of Napoleon is on the way, which we all knew that was gonna happen. Ridley was like, I swear Napoleon's a good movie, I'll just cut out all the good stuff and now I'm gonna put it back in this director's cut. But yeah, now with the rise of streaming, this master filmmaker can make his epics as long as he wants. Embracing technology once again, let's just hope that the streaming services don't turn into killer robots. And it was actually kind of telling when Ridley Scott joined a director's roundtable. He was surrounded by master filmmakers in their own right, all talking about their own movies, but towards the end of the roundtable, it basically just became a Q&A with Ridley, with all these directors curious to pick his mind. How did you do it, Ridley? How do you do it? Tell us your secret. And good old Ridley, he'd just be like, I don't know, just do it. It's just, whatever, experience. I don't know, I'm just great. Be great. But I think it was Mr. Gladiator that said it best. What we do in life echoes in eternity. And thanks to Mr. Scott, there are quite a few masterpieces of cinema echoing the f*** out of eternity right now. And because of that, nobody should give a f*** about what the f*** happened to Ridley Scott, because he's doing just fine.